Alexa stared at the board, trying to understand what was written. Her mind was distracted, and she couldn't focus on the class despite knowing this would be important for her SATs. Her sister had an appointment with the doctor at 3 p.m., and she had to make it back home before that, but the class was dragging on for longer than usual. Her sister Ariel wasn't like any other girl. She was autistic. Autism is a spectrum that varies from mild to severe for different individuals. However, Ariel's was on the latter end of the spectrum, making it difficult for both Alexa and her parents to handle her. Despite all their efforts, Ariel was destructive and violent. Nothing they did changed that. Unfortunately, it didn't end there. Ariel couldn't walk either. She suffered from Guillain-Barré syndrome, an autoimmune disease that weakens her leg muscles. She needed constant attention and care. The weekly doctor's appointment especially was quite an ordeal. Ariel always made these visits extremely difficult, and Alexa was mentally preparing herself for the daunting task ahead. As soon as the sound of the school bell ringing filled the halls, Alexa packed her bags in a rush. Without waiting to say goodbye to her friends, she sped through the hallway. "Alexa, wait up!" called out Susan, her closest friend. "Remember, we're all hanging out at Starbucks later today." "I'm sorry, Suze. Not today. I promise I'll make it up to you guys," Alexa replied. "Let me guess, it's Ariel," asked Susan. Alexa just gave her a knowing look that answered the question. "Sorry, Suze, but I have to go. I'll see you later," said Ariel. Before Ariel could take a step forward, Susan held her hand. "How much longer, Alexa? How much longer will it take for you to live your life? You've done way too much for someone else, yet not even half of that for yourself. Looking back in the future, you'll regret the youth you're literally throwing away right now for your sister. Please, Alexa, just this one time." Tears pooled in Alexa's eyes. She blinked them away and ran away before she had a breakdown in the middle of the school hallway. She couldn't let these thoughts overcome her. Her sister needed her. It wasn't her fault she was born this way. Like her parents always told her, Alexa was gifted with good health, so she must use it to help her struggling sister. She pushed away the thoughts of hatred lurking beneath and focused on getting home. "Alexa, why are you late? I told you to come home early, didn't I? How could you be so nonchalant about your sister's health?" Before Alexa could reply, her mother continued. "I'm not interested in your excuses. Hurry now and pack all the things we need to take. Most importantly, don't forget the file with her medicinal records. We're consulting a different doctor today, and he'll need to see that." Alexa nodded and ran upstairs. She got changed in a rush, took all the medicines her sister might need, and put them in a backpack. She then opened a cupboard, packed to the brim with Ariel's things, and spotted the file in the top right corner. She reached up to take it, but the sound of shattering glass distracted her. She ran down to see what had happened. The scene that greeted her when she entered the hallway was absolute chaos. The cushions were lying all around the room, the chairs upturned. Sitting on the counter was Ariel. Surrounding her on the floor lay shards of glass. "I said I don't want to go!" Ariel screamed noisily. "Please, honey, I promise this doctor is much nicer and he'll help you get better." The patience in their mother's voice was evident, entirely focused on calming Ariel down. Alexa stepped forward to help pacify her sister, but before she could, she felt something pierce her skin. Lifting her leg up, she realized one of the glass pieces had cut her leg. "Mom! Dad! My leg!" she wailed. Her parents' focus, however, was fully trained on Ariel, and her voice was drowned out in the sounds of Ariel screaming. Alexa slowly pulled the shard out of her leg and limped to the kitchen to bandage her leg. Thankfully, it wasn't a severe cut, and she was able to stop the bleeding immediately. She sat in the kitchen with her thoughts until her father distracted her, calling out, "Alexa, bring the bag and wheelchair, please." Alexa limped upstairs and brought the bag and wheelchair back down. Ariel's tantrum seemed to have died down. She saw her mother carrying Ariel, who was clinging hard to her favorite plushie, a unicorn she called Mystic. They got inside the car while Alexa placed the bag and wheelchair in the boot and climbed in afterwards. "Taken everything, Alexa?" asked her father. "Yes, Dad, we can leave." Alexa, Ariel, and her parents sat outside the consultation room, waiting for their turn. Alexa's thoughts wandered to what her friends might be doing now. "Number 25, please come in," called out a nurse, breaking Alexa away from her train of thought, and they entered the room. The doctor asked them to explain the case, and her mother elaborated on how the medicines didn't seem to have a lasting effect. The desperation in her voice was obvious. Despite their many efforts, nothing worked out. "I understand your concern. Especially in cases like this, it's hard to figure out what works best. As you know, it varies drastically between people. We'll run some tests first and then decide what needs to be done. Before that, could I see the medicines she has been on and the previous diagnosis?" said the doctor. Alexa, pass the file, dear, said her mother. Alexa opened the bag's zipper and looked in. To her dismay, the file wasn't inside. Her face paled. She was sure she had taken it. How could it not be there? She frantically checked the other compartments, but the file wasn't in there. She'd left it at home. She hesitantly looked at her parents and could see the rage filling her mother's eyes. Before her mother could berate her, her father cut her off. I'm sorry, it seems as though we don't have it with us today. That's not a problem. However, without referring to her history, I won't be able to prescribe any medication today. You can bring it during the next visit and I'll prescribe it then, said the doctor. The ride back home was a solemn one. Alexa could feel the tension in the air. Her mother was mad at her, and she knew it. As soon as she reached home, she went to her room and shut the door. She didn't want to think of how she messed up. She needed a distraction. She took her phone and started scrolling through Instagram. All she saw was how much fun the rest of her friends were having, while here she was, hating every second of her life. She kept missing out on all the good things her friends got to have. As much as she tried not to think this way, the bitter thoughts kept surfacing. She wanted her life back. She was tired of sacrificing everything for her sister, who didn't even appreciate her efforts. She was also angry with her parents for constantly expecting so much of her. She hated Ariel for snatching away her life, and she hated herself for having these thoughts, but she couldn't control them anymore. Ariel took everything away from her and left her empty, with nothing but regret filling her as she thought of the life she could have had if it weren't for Ariel. A knock on the door distracted her from her thoughts, and her parents entered. Alexa, we need to talk, said her mother. Her dad stood by her side quietly. What you did today was unacceptable, starting with coming late and then forgetting the file. I expected better of you. I emphasized the importance of bringing the file, and yet you forgot. How could you be this careless, Alexa? Haven't I told you plenty of times that your sister's health must be your topmost priority? Ariel comes first. While her mother continued berating her, thoughts of what Susan told her in school kept playing in her mind, and she decided she had had enough. That's the problem, Mom. Ariel comes first. But what about me? Am I not important? Do I not matter? Did you even realize I'd cut my leg? Of course you didn't, because Ariel is all you care about. Ariel is your topmost priority, but she doesn't have to be mine. I have a life outside her, but you don't know that, do you? Because you were never there for me, Mom. Ever. Alexa opened her drawer and pulled out some dusty old gold medals. Did you know I'd won these? I'm a runner, and Susan's parents know this, but you both don't. I had a chance to get better, to be part of the school team, but I'd forsaken that for Ariel. From the day she entered our lives, I'd been sacrificing my dreams, my interests, and most importantly, I sacrificed having parents. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. You and Dad were always busy with Ariel. All the kids would have their parents cheering them on. Each time, my eyes scanned the stands, praying maybe this time you'd be there to see me run. But you weren't. You weren't there when I won the race. You weren't there when I cried quietly to sleep. You weren't there for my plays. You weren't there during my good times nor my bad times. I lost you both the day she was born. Tears streamed down her face. There, she'd said it. The thought she'd been controlling all these days laid out bare. How could you say something like this, Alexa? You... Before her mother could continue, Alexa cut her off and said, I'm leaving, Mom. I'm going to stay at Susan's for the week. I need a break. I need a break, and I can't do this anymore. Alexa started packing her bags and paid no heed to her mother screaming at her. She slung her bag over her shoulder and walked out of the room. Her father followed her out. I'm sorry, Alexa. You don't worry about your mother. I'll convince her. Go take the break you need. Alexa gave him a tight-lipped nod and left the house. She stood outside, waiting for someone to let her in. Susan opened the door, and the second Alexa saw her, she fell into her arms. And Susan held her tightly while she sobbed. They stood there for a couple of minutes until Alexa collected herself. Susan looked at her, beaming with pride. I'm proud of you, Lex, for standing up for yourself. You did great, and don't doubt your decision. You need this break, and you can finally have some color in your life. Alexa nodded and gave Susan a smile of relief, feeling as though the weight of the world had been lifted off her shoulders. Alexa laughed at something Jules had said. She was hanging out with her friends after ages. Looking around at the faces of the people, her friends who stood by her even though she kept pushing them away, she beamed. Things were finally normal. It had been 2 days since she'd left home. Sitting here today, smiling in such a carefree manner, was something she had yearned for so long. For it to happen seemed unreal. Suddenly, her phone rang, grabbing her attention. She looked at the caller ID. It read, Mom. She hesitated. Before she could decide whether to pick it up or not, Susan grabbed the phone. "Not today, Lex," said Susan. "Yeah, for once you need to forget them, Lexi," chimed in Jules. The rest of her friends nodded in agreement. "Susan, why don't you switch your phone off till tomorrow?" suggested Jamie. Susan did just that. The fun and banter from before continued on. Laughter and conversation filled the air, and Alexa let her family take a backseat in her mind like her friends suggested. She focused on making the most of the day and decided to not think of her family, but instead, enjoy herself thoroughly. They spent the whole night dancing, drinking, talking, and having the best time possible. Alexa and Susan returned home after the long day out. "Susan, is that you? Oh my God, I've been trying to reach you for so long. Where have you two been?" Susan's mother, Jane, exclaimed frantically. "Calm down, Mommy. I told you we'd be back today. What happened?" Susan asked. "Alexa, your parents called. It's Ariel." Alexa's heart froze. "What happened, Jane? Tell me, what happened?" Alexa was almost screaming. "She's gone, Alexa. I'm so sorry," said Jane. All the color drained from her face. She was ashen. Alexa couldn't process what she had just heard. No, this can't be real." She collapsed onto the ground, shaking and sobbing. Susan put her arms around her while she cried her heart out. Jane drove Alexa back home. Alexa was silent, still unable to fully comprehend what had happened. As the car slowed, Alexa could see a crowd gathered in front of her house. She got down and ran towards the front porch. Pushing her way through the crowd, she rushed to the front, freezing at the sight before her. She took slow steps towards the body lying in the coffin. Alexa didn't want to believe what she saw. Her mind refused to accept it. She had seen Ariel only 3 days ago. This couldn't be her. "You! How dare you show up here?" wailed her mother with tears streaming down her face. "You have no right to show up here after what you did." "Mom, what happened?" asked Alexa, managing to choke out the words. "Does it matter? Do you even care?" Her mother screamed, ready to pounce on her, but her father held her back. "Alexa, go to your room," he said. Alexa lay on her bed, curled up into a ball, sobbing hysterically. How could this have happened? Was this her fault? How could things have gone this badly? A part of her knew it wasn't her fault, yet she couldn't help but blame herself. If only she was there. If only she had picked that call instead of being selfish. Maybe she could have helped. Maybe Ariel would be here with them today. How could she have been this cruel and self-centered? A knock echoed around her room, and her father entered and sat by her side. "Don't take what your mother said seriously, dear. It's the grief she's dealing with. It's not your fault, Alexa." "I want to know how," she said. "There was an accident. We rushed her to the hospital, but her condition worsened the injuries, and they couldn't do anything to help. Knowing how won't change anything. Just know it wasn't your fault," he replied as though to spare her from the guilt. He placed Mystic in her hand and said, "Ariel was clinging on to this in her last moments, as though she knew it was over. She told me to give this to you. She loved you, Alexa. Even if she never showed it, she did." He stood up and walked away, and Alexa heard the door shut behind him. She couldn't stop wondering what had happened. Did Ariel fall? Could Alexa have stopped it? Despite what her father said, these thoughts plagued her mind. She couldn't ever forgive herself for this. How could she have hated Ariel? Tears continued to stream down her face. Before she realized, she had fallen asleep, clinging on tightly to Mystic. Alexa stood beside the bed of a 12-year-old girl named Emma at 2 o'clock in the night. She too suffered from autism, just like Ariel had. Emma was abandoned when she was young and had no one for her but Alexa. There were many kids like this for whom the only family they had was Alexa. It had been 14 years since Ariel had passed away. The guilt had eaten away at Alexa for years. One day, she decided she'd channel her guilt into a positive way. She established a home for severely autistic and disabled children who had no one to take care of them. These kids became Alexa's whole life. She stayed with them, cared for them, spoke to them, and let them know they weren't alone. She was there by their side for everything. She poured all her efforts into ensuring that these kids got the care and love they needed. In the beginning, it was difficult for Alexa to do this alone, but as word spread, people came in huge numbers to help. Donations poured in from countless sources, and Alexa didn't need to work anymore to pay the bills. She could instead spend her time actively taking care of the kids. Her valiant efforts felt incredibly rewarded every time she saw one of them smiling. Standing here now beside Emma, Alexa was reminded of Ariel. Ariel was the same age when she passed, and Emma reminded her of Ariel. She reminisced about her short time with Ariel. She missed her intensely. Yes, she was difficult on most days. Still, on the occasional good ones, she was an angel, All Alexa could remember was a little child with an innocent smile constantly plastered on her face. Ariel wept quietly, remembering those days. She heard a shuffle and realized Emma was awake and quickly wiped away her tears. "Are you okay, Alexa? What happened?" she asked in her tiny voice. "Nothing, Emma. I was just thinking of someone from my past. Someone who left too soon." "Alexa, will you ever leave us?" Emma asked, the possibility seeming to terrify her. "No, Emma. I'll always be here by you. You kids are my whole life, and I will never walk away from you," Alexa said firmly. "Now, why don't you go back to sleep?" Emma smiled and closed her eyes, her heart at ease, knowing she'll always have someone.